are ready down in the feature match area. Why don't we head on down there as we get ready to play for absolutely everything? The title of Pro Tour champion, a beautiful display of sportsmanship there from our players. Michael Feng, the higher seed here, going to have the choice of going first or second. And over on Mara's side, we see that crown
of reflection
suited up in the head spot, and that is not something we've seen too many times out of Dromai's. Brendan, how do you think that influences this matchup?
I haven't played with this card since back in the Prism days during the Starvo meta. It definitely has been a while. Allows you to play that aura from hand. I think that it's going to help her enact her game plan potentially with the passing Mirage. But, we do see this Flame Scale Furnace, Ghostly Touch like we talked about. And, of course, the Snapdragon Scalers. Michael Feng, same equipment we saw at the previous Dromai matchup, does go ahead and heave this Thunderquake.
Okay, so looking to get aggressive right out the gun smoke. And, we talked a lot about Mara Faris maybe being the aggressor in this matchup, getting a substantial early start. There is potential for Michael Feng to do the exact same thing. Maybe claim tempo and never let it go. But Mara Faris does have the counter to a heave here. Going to go ahead and try and do some commanding and conquering. Of course, you may find uses for those seismic surges elsewhere, but it is nice to take out that big attack from Arsenal.
Yep, this command and conquer not doing Michael Feng a favor like we've seen in previous games potentially.
Correct.
Sometimes a command and conquer can help clear a heaved card, so you just kind of free roll-ish the seismic surge tokens, nevertheless. Two-card block. Very predictable. I think that Michael Feng is going to play a very similar game plan to the last match. Important to note, Brian, it's not the shield we saw versus the previous Dromai player.
Yeah, change to Stalagmite, and that's a really, really big deal here for Michael Feng. Maybe saying Mara has less ability to play through Frostbites. And you know what? Looking at the list, I'm inclined to agree. I think the shield here, a really savvy, smart choice from Michael Feng. Will track very carefully when that has some influence over this game. I do want to point out early turns there from Mara. No arena presence yet, was not able to set up any dragons, just kind of a very mild turn by Dromai standards, trying to sort of answer what Michael's up to. And maybe this is the opportunity for Michael to get to play a little bit more aggressive in this matchup. You do see that Thunderquake being deployed. It's just a blue one, I believe, so not the largest possible output, but still immediate threat. And you see Mara saying, okay, Oldham, if you're really a damage deck, you're going to have to prove it to me. You're not getting any resources from me this early in the game. Committed to defending my life total.
Wow, quite the change up from the previous Dromai versus Oldhim matchup. I think that, Michael Feng is going to play a pretty similar game plan to his last match. Maybe very much focused on keeping the board at parity. I do think that Mara's deck, like we talked about, a bit more explosive and a lot more danger in these earlier turns. So as a result, I don't think that Michael Feng's going to be going face too much after this turn until we get to that sort of mid to late game potentially.
Yeah, and for that reason, that explosiveness, I'm so intrigued by this choice of Stalagmite. I think it can have such massive influence over this game. It's not like Rampart of the Ram's Head is a slouch in this matchup. Very much good at preventing preposterous amounts of damage throughout the game. And if you go back to Michael Feng's last game, I was talking with Tannen before this last round. He said the combination of shield plus crown must have prevented something like 20 damage over the course of that game. Not going to have access to this. The Stalagmite is capped at preventing 3 hard damage, but one of the things we know, even going back to the Starvo era, Stalagmite very good at preventing virtual damage. What it does is shuts down a turn, it prevents you from getting wider, and sometimes represents actually a block for 8, a block for 9. It can be honestly anything.
Not
in the right
hard
scenario.
to potentially block 20 damage, 20 theoretical damage if we do get to a situation where Mara's board state is starting to overwhelm Michael Feng. On top of that, I think that in that scenario, this shield is great tempo as well. You're basically making Mara potentially just pass their turn back to you. You're able to clear more, try to get the board up closer to parity. But we do see a Miraga into Chromai to start this out.
Yeah, nice dragons.
Two very powerful dragons.
Empress of Dromai getting right to work. Empress of Volcor. I guess Empress of Dromai also fits. Mara great in both fictional and real-life scenarios. There's that Chromai rumbling through.
Token on the Dromai, I think to mention the single action point right now.
Very worth noting the number of Chromais that we're going to be working with. And I know Brendan always working hard to track what's left in the deck here, understand how many options are left, because they're so critical to so many of those endgame states. If you want to have the opportunity to set up those big ghostly touch turns, the big burn them all turns, you are reliant on getting value out of these popping prevention dragons, the ones that don't let your turn get absolutely stolen from you, because you expect Michael Feng to have a popper almost every single turn of the game.
Yeah, Brian, I think in the match against Yuha, we saw almost 6 to 8 Raw guys played. It was absolutely ridiculous. You see those remembrances really putting in work. 2 remembrances for Mara Faris. There was 2 for Yuha as well. Just keep that in mind as we sort of progress through this matchup because it's critical reshuffling back in some of the more powerful cards in Mara's deck.
I agree with you. You have to be patient. You have to get value out of all your cards. You have to have access to them multiple times. Here is a pop of that Chromai. That is, of course, going to generate an action point. Mara looking to go ahead and use Flamescale Furnace, make some ash. And it's time for another dragon, baby. Very successful dragon-making turn for Mara, as you would expect.
Did we miss a trigger on the Ghostly Touch?
Looks like it in this case. And look, these players have played a lot of Flesh and Blood. Just an absolutely massive amount.
There's no pomp.
Oh, of course, yeah. No
Maragai,
pop there.
of course.
Maragai.
Yep, sometimes
the
these Dramai sort of board states can be hard to keep track of, but
foolish of us to question Mara, honestly.
You gotta orient yourself as you start to understand. And we are using a little bit of a different version of the dragons with the Marvel ones coming out here. Absolutely beautiful, but not super attuned to them quite yet because they are a bit unique.
Yeah, and Kyloria, also the follow-up here. Just annoying stuff from Mara thus far.
Interesting to commit the Command & Conquer to a 3 block on the Chromai. I'm assuming there's other poppers in hand in that case. We see a Glacial Footsteps queued up for the block here on Kyloria.
Yep, that is going to be a clean pop.
And there will be the trigger for the Ghostly Touch.
Yeah, obviously not missed. I don't know what we were thinking. Questioning the Empress for even a moment. And a nice turn there from Mara, able to get some arena presence, starting to set up some dragons.
Clears the Maragai with the Titan's Fist.
Yeah, Michael Fang's side just going to go ahead, do a little bit of a reset. It's the name of the game right now. Keep this arena under control. Do not let those dragons form a full dumpster and just spiral all over this arena.
Mara looks to have a 4-card hand here. Again, a good start with Maragai and Chromai, but just not the explosiveness. Sorry about that. We were sort of worried about seeing here. Uvia does come down. That is going to be another very scary dragon for Michael Feng here. Important to note that there's only a single copy of Uvia in the deck, as opposed to our previous match where there were multiple.
Yeah, this is a big one, and I'm curious how much Mara is going to invest to just keep this around for a little while. Of course, a big butt there on Uvia does have 6 defense. Kind of requires some way of getting a big burst of damage. And if you just protect it, you just keep it out of popper danger, there is a way to just accumulate advantage with those Ashwings across multiple turns.
So we are going to see Michael tanking here. Balancing that economy of cards. It starts here from the very first few turns of the game.
Just a quick update from our calling. We do have a champion. It's Merrick Kemp. Playing Dash. Dash, Brendan. Didn't even have to consider Dash in this top 8. Showing perhaps there's another wrinkle out there in this format for us to consider.
This Dash looking to have very favorable pairings through top 8, by the way. Was paired against Matt Rogers on Oldhim in round 1. I'm assuming it's a tree for our Dash, and then paired into another Oldhim in the semifinals after there was a potential Lexi in that bracket, but found an Oldhim, made to the finals, and actually did take it down. So, yeah, a lot of surprises on this weekend.
Yeah, a lot to learn about this metagame for sure. A lot to learn about our game being played here. Michael Feng carefully considering options. You do see those 3 dragons back on defense, and this is a very, very important play from Michael. It's going to be Enlightened Strike.
Yep. We talk about Michael Feng's deck being action point poor, not being able to clear double dragons on most turns, but Enlightened Strike is the exception to that, but is going face.
Yeah, and maybe this signals a big change in Michael Feng's approach, and there is the 2-card 8, the famous play. And Did Michael Feng just turn this into a
I
race?
was going to say, Michael Feng is such a dynamic player. Look at switching out to the stalagmite, being sort of the beatdown here, 39 to 27, and we have Tunic ticking up to 3, 2 card 8 off of this endless winter. I mean, this is a ton of value
Well,
generated by the
I actually want to
to
ask another question now, Brendan. Did Michael Feng intend on racing from the beginning?
Very
That's now the
possible.
thing I want to consider, because you see that choice of Stalagmite. That makes perfect sense if you don't want to play a long game. If you think you can actually just output damage, make Mara uncomfortable, not give her time to set up these dragons. Because look, these dragons are out of control now. You can't really come back from this position all that quickly. You need things to line up very well when you give up this turn, and you have to commit to the idea that I will kill you. That's how I'm going to win this game. And if you're Mara, you've had a real curveball thrown at you by Michael Feng. This is going to be a very important turn to sort out on Drama's side.
Very interesting. I still am not sure if Michael Feng is fully on the aggressive plan or is just taking the value play when it is presented to him. But we'll have to see over the turns. I mean, you put Mara's life total down far enough. I mean, it is a version of tempo. It is like clearing things off the board because she's going to be forced to block with cards from hand, giving you more room to clear, clear dragons, get parity on the board, etc. So, I mean, that's the thing about Oldhim is you sort of have this multifaceted way of disrupting the opponent both through defense and offense, and I think we're seeing that now. The deck can pivot sort of turn by turn.
One of the things I love about Flesh and Blood is that actions that do one thing often imply a second thing. When you do things like pressure your opponent's life total, it has repercussions to how they're able to play offensively, what cards increase in priority. It's such a beautiful, delicate dance of a game where there's this constant back and forth between so many axes at the same time. Michael Feng showing exactly that with that decision to go face with both Endless Winter and an Enlightened Strike on that last turn.
Yeah, I wonder if Michael Feng looks at Mara's list and then comes into this match and says, how do I lose this game, right? We have this much more aggressive Dramai list, very heavy on red cards, not a lot of blue supporting cards, and probably just thinks the same thing that we maybe concluded, which is that if Mara gets too far ahead in the early game, develops too much of a board, it's going to be very hard for Michael Feng to come back. So potentially thinks that, it's not even really the end game loop that he's worried about. It's this early game. And attacking is a way of sort of slowing that down.
A very insightful shift. You and I kind of sussed out level 1 of this matchup, how it might play out. Michael Feng was on level 2, perhaps, looking a step ahead, trying to figure out how things could go wrong. Were there options to play around it? Meanwhile, on Mara's side, it is going to be a beautifully altered Enlightened Strike. I have a feeling who the alterist on that might be. 5 go again is the play here. For those of you who don't know, Mara, on top of being perhaps the best Dromai player in the world, also one of the best alterists in the world, does absolutely beautiful work.
I personally have many cards altered from her, all of my wizard decks. But yeah, I think that I wonder if Michael here, can take the damage from something like Enlightened Strike, but will still take the popper trade on something like Chromai if Mara does swing with it, or an Uvia, but I don't think that Mara will swing with the Uvia.
And look at this. This is time for a Stalagmite block, and I love tracking these. I love asking the question, how much damage is this Stalagmite going to actually prevent? 2 on its face, but gives that crucial frostbite. Is that going to impede Mara's turn significantly here? What is an arsenal? What is an
time snap potion?
Has the blue ready to pitch. Now, this probably did change the shape of this turn quite a bit. It could be she was looking to set up with a time snap potion, but given how this game is played out, I'm actually not sure about that. It could actually just be that she wanted to go ahead and do this kind of setup anyway, and maybe pitch her a threat in arsenal, just make sure she was getting the most out of this hand, and not really thinking about that time snap potion endgame quite yet. Of course, you could always get it set up on the second cycle. No harm in pitching it this go around.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder to set up on the second cycle when your life total is 20 sub, maybe 10 sub by that point.
Fair enough.
But I just want to note that Mara does have 4 blues in her deck, so I do think that Michael, it was a good gamble if he was trying that she would have the red card in hand.
Agreed. Yeah, if there's any cost in arsenal at that point, you completely close off that card from being played. You just make sure the card in hand can't be played, a very high value block in the aggregate. We'll see if it actually plays out that way. It is going to be a popper used here on that Ashwing. Ghostly Touch ticking up, and the turn passes back to Michael Feng. 1 counter gone on that Stalagmite. See if we're on Dragon cleanup duty here, or we're continuing to pressure Mara's life total.
Yeah, I think it's sort of probably contextual in Michael Feng's hand, and we do see the E-strike. I do think this is going upstairs, Brian.
I think so as well. And it makes sense, right? If Michael Feng has a popper on every turn and can go ahead and commit that popper to the first attack, Mara's turns never go wide enough to actually pressure him. And if he keeps offering these huge damage exchanges, he's just ahead. It's very hard for Mara to claw her way back into this.
Pretty incredible to see the Oldham deck pivot from such wildly different strategies against the same hero, one match to the next.
Absolutely. It's one of the reasons, Brendan, why I am convinced one of the things we do too much, and when I say we, I'm including myself in this, we're all guilty of it. We talk about things in terms of hero matchups. That's actually not how Flesh and Blood is played. It's played against the deck, not the hero. The hero informs what the deck may be like, but it's not just as simple as Oldham versus Dromai. It is about the context. It is about the game plans. It is about the individual card choices made by both of these players, and they can change so much about how a game is played matchup to matchup.
Yeah, so really threatening to put Mara at quite a critical life total here, because once we get down below 10, things like the red glacial footsteps in Michael Feng's deck do become a bit of a threat.
And if you're Mara, how can you really justify not defending here?
Wow.
How about a second E-strike coming in for 5? It's really hard to justify not defending here, because the problem is that if you do not defend and you only offer back taking one card from your opponent on his turn, you're just not doing anything. You've actually become the action point poor deck at that point.
Well, if you don't defend, Michael Feng will force you to defend in the next 1 to 2 turns, I believe, and has plenty of cards in his deck that don't even give you the option to do so. We have Macho Grande with Dominate, we have things like Glacial Footsteps, so I think you need to keep your life total above 10 ideally.
Yeah, Mara agrees. Mara not only has played technically perfectly this entire weekend, just strategically perfectly as well. She understands everything we're saying. She's 10 steps ahead of us, knows exactly what she's supposed to be doing in these scenarios. It is going to be Flame Call Awakening being played here. That is going to get a little go again action going, not vulnerable to popping. So a nice little reprieve from the pop game plan of Michael Feng for Mara.
Yeah, speaking of reprieve, Michael Feng has a big life total to work with just raw damage with no on-hit effects. I think that Michael Feng has a lot of room. We do see the shield out here again. I think that this is actually very much pointing towards Michael Feng's strategy to be more aggressive in this matchup, because I see the Stalagmite as a very aggressive-oriented card.
I agree.
Blocking like this, giving Michael Feng more of a window to play out his large attacks.
One of the reasons why Stalagmite was so successful in Starvo decks in the past, because Starvo very much was content to play both sides of the coin, to sometimes be aggressive, sometimes be defensive. And the aggression continues from Michael Feng. It is Spinal Crush being played.
Threatening a pummel as well, not the super efficient pummel off the tunic, but very possible.
Still scary. And you got to consider it if you're Mara. That could absolutely devastate your turn. And look, if we see a pummel here, there's no question anymore. Michael Feng was the beatdown from the absolute jump start.
Yeah, Michael Feng, potentially 2 red pummels in the deck.
Yeah, pretty fulsome block here. It looks like 8 being put in front.
Oh, he's going
Crown
to
of Seeds activation.
Wow,
Pitches
finds the blue. There's the pummel.
Finds
Very
the
nice.
Pummel, yeah.
And critically, the on-hit effect will be here because we did block for 8.
Yeah, 5 damage going to come through, dropping Mara down to 13. Also critically, no go again on the next turn. Has to discard a card. This is going to be a very anemic turn for Mara, and this life total quickly getting out of control. You mentioned things like those red glacials. Mara starting to hear the footsteps, if you will, very much under threat right now.
As well as the second pummel, to be harder and harder for Mara to play around it, because she won't have the life total buffer to be able to take that damage, right? Might have to overcommit to blocking something that could be potentially pummeled. But if there's one thing we know about pummel is when you overblock about the potential, it just gets arsenal and you face the same problem on the next
turn.
Head
right back to the next turn. No stress at all. It is, of course, going to be a popper here. Chokeslam coming down. Pops that Chromai. Action point received. Going to take up the Ghostly Touch. Follow up here from the Dromai player.
So Brian, if you're in Mara's position right now, how do you get out of this game state scenario? Because I would assume Mara came into this match thinking that Michael Hamilton might take a more defensive approach, very similar to his previous game against Dromai. Now you're presented with all this damage, you've been pummeled, etc. How do you get back into this game?
I'll be honest with you, Brendan. I don't know. I don't know for Mara right now. I'm a bit concerned. Michael Feng has navigated these early turns so expertly, has gotten into such a strong position. I'm not really sure how she gets back into these games. For things like Lexi, you find your power cards, right? You go to your codexes, you go to your three of a kinds. That's not really how Dromai works. Dromai is a slow accumulation of advantages, and Mara did a good job of accumulating those advantages. The problem is they just didn't really line up against Michael's game plan to do anything because it was just go offensive, end your turn with one card from my hand every single time, and just bleed that life total out. And as that continues to happen, dominate becomes much, much more of a problem for Mara. And there's some low block values in Mara's deck as well. A lot of 2 blocks. So just putting out a big attack is going to demand a lot of cards once this life total gets very low.
Mara currently no Ash as well, potentially making one here, but just not as much. We have seen a lot of our Dromai players have a ton of Ash going into sort of this mid game, but Mara definitely struggling for it. We do see Miraging Metamorph here, surely going to meet a popper.
Just going to get popped one more time. Looks like it's time for Crown here. Going to activate the Crown of Reflection. Question mark. Let's see. I saw it indicated towards.
Yep, it is an instant. Looks like maybe not activating Crown of Reflection, but potentially giving Michael Feng a lot of information about what might be an arsenal. Could also be a bluff, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a little hint of body language there. Not sure.
Wow, a pulverized. That is 14 damage. That is 2 damage over lethal.
Yeah, lethal being presented here. 21 minutes into this game. A very different texture than that hour and 50-minute marathon we saw previously. And Mara Faris, already put up against the wall, has to find answers to this huge, huge threat from Michael Feng.
What a dynamic player out of Michael Feng here on Oldham. This is an absolutely just explosive game.
Yeah, and I thought about it a bit. I did find an answer to the question, how do you get back into this game if you're in Mara's seat? You actually need Michael Feng to completely miss on a popper for maybe 2 turns.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the path back. And if that sounds pretty far-fetched, it is. I acknowledge that. Mara's going to need a lot to get back into this game. Needs some way, some blessing from maybe the Emperor himself to just get back into this, find some purchase, be able to offer some threat. But now, facing down 14, she's got to figure out blocks, and that means probably not going to get much of a turn this next go-around.
So as Michael Feng whittled down Mara Faris' life total, we talked about her life total getting down to this sort of 10 value where Michael Feng can present the threat, and Mara simply has no choice but to block.
And look at this, 2 block, 2 block, 2 block, 2 block for Mara. That means a block of only 8, and a huge amount of damage leaking through from that pulverize. This spells real trouble for Mara.
That's the trade-off of power with some of these, these go-again attacks like Ravenous Rabble. Just not lining up well against this Pulverize. And now pretty much every attack that Michael Feng comes through with is going to demand cards out of Mara's hand. And we know Mara's deck is reliant on these larger hands, on stringing together very, very aggressive, sort of aggressive turn cycles. But it does look like there may have been a bit of an issue with the top card of Michael Feng's deck.
Yeah, I think inadvertently revealed by Michael Feng, just bumped it a little bit as he was reaching. Clear to draw here.
Yep.
And Mara finds herself at a greatly diminished 6 life total, no cards in hand. Mara finding all 2 blocks on a critical turn. And Mara's so good-natured about it. Sort of a wry smile, a shake of the head. She's been in these situations, maybe not quite at these high of a stakes, but she knows this is the game we sign up to play.
Yep, and there's that passing Mirage that we talked about earlier, so it was not a bluff on the Crown of Reflection there.
Yeah, and I think if you're Michael, you don't care anymore.
Representing a pummel on this as well. Mara simply, is that maybe a red pitch?
I think that is a red pitch, Glacial Footsteps.
I would have said if there was a 2 floating, simply can't play around it, but still at this, going to need to take cards from hand. I mean, it's a lot of pressure from
And look at what's being pitched to play this Endless Winter. It is a Macho Grande Glacial Footsteps. That shows you what Mara is in store for should this game extend any length of time. There's just going to be hosts of dominated attacks coming her way, and she is going to be under threat literally forever. And it's funny, we say a lot about how aggressive Michael Feng has been in this matchup, how much he has absolutely seized the tempo here, how much he's threatening Mara's life total. But again, talking about challenging on multiple axes, by doing this, it is now possible that it's just exceedingly easy for Michael to fatigue Mara from this spot as well.
Yep, that's what we talk about is fatigue is not only sort of this one-dimensional defending with cards, run the opponent out of threat via defending. When you attack with a card like Endless Winter, presenting 8 damage, demanding 3 cards from your opponent, which is what just happened, you're winning on that trade for card economy. We do see Dust Up here, 0 for 4 out of Mara.
Yeah, again,
touching the Snapdragon Scalers.
Nice unpoppable card in this instance. I'm trying to check out Michael's hand here. It is possible that this was that fabled no popper hand, but it may be too little too late in this instance.
But we did sync, so we could have found it.
Yeah. Here comes that Ashwing.
Crown of Seas potentially available as well. Looks like Michael Feng, working with 33 life.
Yeah, ready to take a bit of damage here, and who can blame him? It seems pretty safe. Falls to 31 off this Ashwing.
Attacking with Uvia,
Yeah,
potentially.
Uvia as well.
Ooh, he does have a Glacial Footsteps in hand.
Okay.
Ryan.
Yeah, and now he has to ask, do I actually care? The answer is no. It looks like he's going to take damage one more time, and I think the plan is I want to use this Glacial Footsteps. I am the aggressor. You are under threat from me. I'm going to play this card. What are you going to do about it? Pitching, Rouse the Ancients. Plays, Rouse the Ancients. Shows that blue Glacial Footsteps alongside a blue Autumn's Shots. Just enough to get our 7 go again.
And I'm assuming it will be followed up by a Titan's Fist, and we will arsenal that Glacial Footsteps, which is...
That's textbook Oldham right there. That's the way to do it. And Mara knows she's under a massive amount of threat. And another hand of all 2 blocks here could be absolutely devastating for Mara, facing probably what amounts to 11 damage on this turn.
Yeah, Michael Feng also coming up to a Tunic turn after this, going to have 3 counters, it looks like.
Textbook Oldham play. Everything about Michael Feng's performance today has been textbook.
Yeah, immaculate.
Perfect. Absolutely methodical, perfect pacing, excellent game planning. Can't say enough about him thus far. To take nothing away from the other side, Mara also showing the same level of mastery.
Down to 2.
Yeah, and falling down to 2 here. It is now going to be Titan's Fist. Demands an additional block. That looks like that's going to clean up the passing Mirage. And I love the discipline here from Michael. Like, yes, Mara's at 2. But let's just cross the T's. Let's dot the I's. Let's do everything we have to. Get the passing Mirage off. Have options to use those poppers. And
he has the ice card.
There's a handful of ice card. Yep. And Brendan, we are moments away, I believe, from crowning our Pro Tour champion.
Look at him throw that hand down. He knows.
It is going to take an absolute miracle for Mara Faris to make it out of this. She's found many this weekend. Alongside incredible play, has certainly been in tough situations before, but none tougher than this. Glacial Footsteps offering 8 dominate from the arsenal. Ice card ready to be fused.
Mara having access to 1 sand cover in the deck, but currently no Ash. Does have access to Sink Belows and Sigil of Solace. Some of them could have been sided out in this matchup. This Glacial Footsteps is lining up to, looks like it's lining up to close the game out.
It's extremely threatening. There's going to be a Kyloria here, so a bit of a redraw potentially. Should Mara want it. But no, it looks like, again, discipline from Michael Feng. Just going to go ahead, use a popper, clean up that Kyloria. Ghostly Touch ticks up. Turn ends for Mara. Is this it for Michael Feng? Is he able to dominate this Footsteps out of Arsenal? Doesn't care. Doesn't have to dominate.
Doesn't matter. You don't need dominate when you take all 4 cards Fair
enough.
Away from the opponent.
I agree. This is completely fine.
No need to take the risk on the Kyloria, potentially letting it draw into something. This is going to be Glacial Footsteps 4-8. A lot of damage here from Michael Feng.
Even in this instance, Michael Feng continuing to be patient. You see me getting ahead of myself. Not Michael Feng, the master. Slow, steady, methodical. 8 damage offered. Eats the vast majority of Mara's hand here. Plenty of time to find that killing blow.
Yep, never getting too excited. Never overextending.
It's a Ravenous Rabble.
Shows a Billowing Mirage.
Yeah, and this is a nice play here. This is going to let this combat chain get a little wide, but the gap is just so huge at this point. Michael Feng doesn't care about anything anymore.
Potentially queuing up for a popper here. There's a Macho Grande, and one of those cards that would potentially close out the game.
Yeah, you expect there's probably another one, or again, Michael Feng just showing immaculate discipline, saying, I don't actually need to do this. There's plenty of options here. Let's see what the play is. It looks like a pitch channel Lake Fritz.
Just gonna
command and conquer.
But we are representing one particular card that Mara absolutely cannot play around right now, and that is Red Pommel.
And look at Mara's body. You saw it on her face. As soon as she checked the tunic, she looked at Michael Feng's hand, and she was like, oh, Lord, I have to give you all of my cards, don't I?
If she has the 2 blocks in hand, she could potentially die through that.
Yeah. No, very true.
The exact lethal, I think.
Very true.
Tough spot.
Again, a small shake of her head on Mara's side. Knows exactly what is being represented here. We all know it. We've all sat across from this exact play. Yeah, and Mara just says, I can't play around
this. He has it. There
Michael
it is.
has the pummel, and he is the Pro Tour champion. Takes down Pro Tour Baltimore. A gracious display of sportsmanship from our two players there. A firm handshake. Both played out of their minds spectacularly this weekend. But it is Michael Feng, our Pro Tour champion, on Oldham. What a performance. Running off to share the moment